back. It's just gone 20 past 6. Making the news this morning, the arrest of a homeowner and his wife after two suspected burglars were shot in their home.
Well, of course, we can't go into the specifics of this case for legal reasons. It does highlight, doesn't it, the issue of how far any of us can go to protect our homes. So what exactly are the rules?
Public outcry over a number of cases led to the Prime Minister vowing last year to bring in stronger measures to protect homeowners. The most high-profile case of this kind was that of farmer Tony Martin, who was jailed for murdering one burglar and wounding another back in 1999. After appeal, his conviction was later reduced to manslaughter and his sentence cut to just 5 years. Under the current law, anyone can use reasonable force to protect themselves or others. As a general rule, the more extreme the circumstances and the fear felt, the more force you can lawfully use in self-defence. But later this year, the law will be amended to allow a homeowner to use reasonable force to protect their property as well as themselves.
Well, criminal lawyer Sean Caulfield is here with us this morning. Morning, Sean. We're not going to go into specifics of what may or may not happened here, but in general terms, explain the law as it stands at the moment.
As it stands, you can use reasonable force to defend yourself. As long as the force you've used is reasonable, you have no real risk of a criminal prosecution.
How do you know what reasonable is? Because, in fact, it happened to a family member of mine. A gang came into their home very recently looking for Indian gold, because that's the big thing at the moment, I think. But and I was saying if he had done anything, he probably would have ended up being arrested himself.
Well, I think everything has to be judged on its particular facts. I think one way of explaining it might be to say that if you have a rugby team within a property and a small burglar comes into the property, that rugby team cannot use all of its force to defend the property. That would be ridiculous. If, on the other hand, you have a single mother with two small children and she's presented with the gang pushing at her door, perhaps breaking her door in, she could use perhaps a very, very large amount of force to defend herself. The two situations are so different. Everything must be judged on its particular facts.
Isn't that the problem, Sean, though? It's open to interpretation by a judge or jury, and instantly I think of the case in the States of the shooting of Trayvon Martin. It might have seemed reasonable force at the time for him to be shot, but afterwards, in the cold light of day, in a courtroom, it may not do.
I think there is some fear there, and I can understand that fear. But what the public can be reassured by is the decision is ultimately made, the decision of guilt or innocence is ultimately made by a jury. Ordinary people, the same people who have the same fears, go to the same supermarkets you see in the same places as you and I. So there is a real protection there that it's the jury that make the ultimate decision.
It's got to be, I suppose, they've got to judge whether you did it in anger, whether you did it because you were trying to sort of get revenge, if you like, on someone who's attacked you, or whether you were genuinely doing it. I suppose it's if their back's turned to you, is it? If you attack them when their back's turned to you.
Well, I think it will, again, turn on what's happening at that moment. Did you shout a warning, for example, if you're about to use a weapon? Did you feel that you had no other option? And judges are very, very skilled in this. They will direct a jury on the law and remind them that you cannot judge someone, as you've just said, on the finer points of what they're doing in a moment of great distress for them.
Absolutely, which none of us will understand until it happens to us.
Absolutely, but there are not a multitude of cases going through the courts where homeowners are being convicted of attacking burglars. It is rare. Very, very rare, and the public can be reassured that the police do not go around arresting homeowners unnecessarily. The Crown Prosecution Service have a series of safety measures in place to make sure that this doesn't happen, and of course, ultimately, even if you get to court, the jury know exactly the same things you know. They know the fears of a homeowner, they know what it's like to be home alone and hear the floorboards squeak and think, well, who's that? They know how that makes you feel. You're judged by your peers, and people can be reassured by that.
Although the law is about to change on this later in the year, I'm sure we will revisit the subject then. Sean, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, Sean.
Well, it's 26 minutes past 6. Time to speak to Laura, who's got the weather.